Power is what makes the world go round. And so it's important that you know what your power is being used for. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hi everyone, welcome to Tigner Adventures. My name's David, my wife Ninette, and our little cat Tansy. We live in our rig full-time, and we are currently in northern Utah at my sister's place. We are mooch docking, all right? But when we mooch dock, we also typically always just run off of our solar. So we don't really plug in most places that we go, even RV parks. For those of you that just travel from RV park to RV park, maybe today's video won't be as interesting to you because you have unlimited power for the most part. But when you're boondocking, which is what we typically do, or you're running off of your batteries all the time, it's important to know what power is being used and when. In our last video, I showed you our battery bank, and I mentioned to you that the batteries are the brains of your whole electrical system. All right, and that's when it's dealing with boondocking, because you're running off of the batteries, whether you're using an inverter to create AC power for your TV, microwave, things like that, or you're just running your lights and water pump and things like that that just run off of 12 volts. It's important to know how much power each item uses so that you have the right amount of batteries to run that system. And those batteries require so much power from our solar panels to make sure they get charged up each day. So we're going to look at that, and I'm going to show you these apps and how we actually manage it, and look at our solar, how we look at our power usage and things. And so we'll go through and figure that, and I'll show you what we're actually using, and you'll be surprised at how this all works out. So to start off with, I want to go back to this little shunt that we have on our batteries right here in our battery compartment to the right hand side. All the power from the batteries run through this little block, and it actually ports back to this app. And within this app, we can see exactly what's happening to our batteries. Whether they're getting charged or we're using, how much battery power we've actually used, and how much is actually being used right now. And so this little app is pretty nice as to figuring things out. Basically, all I really am interested in is how many amp hours I've used, whether I'm at zero or whether I'm negative, whatever. In my particular case, I have lead acid. But we're not really talking batteries right now. We want to talk about power usage. And this power usage is going to be the same whether you use lithium or lead. It don't matter. Every battery is rated for a specific amount of time, which is referred to as amp hours. And because of that amp hour rating, these apps that I have allow me to actually monitor that. So if you look right here on my wall, you'll see that on the left here I have a little red LED with numbers on it. And this measures how many amps are being drawn through the rig. This is AC amps. So I'm going to just bring my app up from my phone, which is showing what my batteries are doing. And so on the left here is 3.1 AC amps, and on the right you can see that the DC amps being used is 35.16 amps. That's the current. All right, so we got a negative 35. That's how much we're drawing from the batteries. Now this if you look down here towards the bottom, we show that our time remaining is 4 hours and 7 minutes. So at this particular rate of usage, I can keep running everything that's using this 3.1 amps for up to 4 hours before my batteries are going to be dead. Now 3.1 amps, that's not what I'm normally running. I'm normally running less than an amp on AC, but in this particular case I've turned my refrigerator onto AC mode just to kind of throw everything through a frizzy here actually. But I just wanted to show you the difference. So you're seeing AC on the left and DC on the right. Now watch what happens when I turn my microwave on. So I have 4 hours left, but when I actually turn my microwave on, you can see that the time remaining drops very quickly. And now I have, with my microwave going, it's pulling 16.6 amps about, and my DC amps is 193 amps being pulled, and I'm down to 1 hour, actually less than 2 hours of time remaining on my batteries. Now that's because my microwave's running, right? My microwave isn't always running, and so that's the thing you got to look at when you're trying to figure out your usage. Remember, in my last video I said our typical usage is about 160 consumed amp hours. So down at the bottom here you can see right now I'm at 190 consumed amp hours, because I've actually turned my refrigerator on and I left it run for a while just to kind of show some different numbers for you guys. But normally you want that to be 0. So in this particular case I'm at a negative 190. Now what that means is, if we go back to my past video that I was talking about the battery charger, or even my solar, okay, my battery charger would put out 80 amps. So it's going to take almost at 80 amps, it's going to take just less than 3 hours to charge my batteries back up. Okay, at least 3 hours I should say, to get back that 190 amp hours that's being used. All right, now if it's my solar, because I have 1200 watts of solar, if I'm on a good day, all right, and if it's not smoky, which it is right now, sometimes it will kick up and back and forth to 56 amps. So I can actually get about 56 amps of solar charging my batteries all day long. And so you can see with this particular app, I can now monitor a lot of my different things and kind of get an idea of how much is actually being used. There's other ways too. You can convert the AC amps that are listed on an appliance, and you can start kind of figuring out watts to amps and everything. But people, I think, get tied up on watts too much, because when it really comes down to the whole process, everything is really based on amp hours, and even your batteries are amp hours, so nobody really necessarily cares about the watts. And if you look back at the app that I was getting, it does list the watts that are being used, so you do get a listing there of those. But if you can figure out how many amp hours your battery has, and then watch that to see how much it's being used, for example, the microwave. I only ran the microwave for about 10 seconds or so, so normally would run the microwave for a couple minutes to cook something, and so that's how, you know, we're not running all the time, even though it's rated at 16 amps, or in our particular case 1500 watt microwave. All right, even though it's rated that high, doesn't mean that I'm going to be using that the whole time. And so when we're talking usage, it's important to understand that all these devices that you have within your rig are all being used a little bit here, a little bit there. Some may be being used a lot. For example, the refrigerator would be a constant pull. So if you plan to keep your refrigerator going on AC power the whole time, or your refrigerator runs on DC power, then you need to compensate by having enough batteries to be able to allow the refrigerator to run the whole time. All right, so maybe my examples, you know, aren't realistic. You know, if you don't have the batteries, then in our particular case, we always run our refrigerator on propane. So we aren't using up our batteries all the time. So I do want to show you something else though, related to usage, that maybe will be helpful too, because I know a lot of you are looking at this because you want to get into solar. So depending on the size of solar you put in also depends on the usage. So in this particular example, let me jump into here and kind of explain what I've got going on here. First thing I'm going to show you is, this is why I'm saying the brains of the system are the batteries. Okay, I'm going to show you the two apps of the Victron things that I'm using. So I'm using a Victron solar controller, and I'm using a Victron battery monitor. Now on the left here you'll see that I am using 48 watts of solar. So out of my 1200 watts at midday, I am producing 48 watts of solar. not 1200, 48 watts. And on the right side here, you can see my other display is showing that my batteries are 100% charged already at noon, and I'm only using 1.26 DC amps coming from my solar controller. Now, if you look on the solar controller side, it actually shows my current is down by the bottom there as 3.40 amps. Now, that's how many amps that my solar's producing right now with this 48 watts of solar, is this 3.40 amps. Now when I look at the battery side, then it shows that I am plus 1.26 amps is how much actual current is being going into my batteries right now. I'm using 2 amps, and those are being used in things like my carbon monoxide detectors, all my different detectors, my propane detectors, my whatever else I may have on. I don't have any lights on right now, but I have different little things that that the system is using those 2 amps. And so even though the solar controller is giving me 3 amps, right, the batteries really only need 1, and so the solar controller is saying, okay, here's your 1.26 amps that you need. Oh, and by the way, you're using some other things, so I'm going to give you a little bit more to cover those so that they're all working together. And you'll notice that on the battery thing, it says that my time remaining is infinite because the solar is giving me everything I need, but in this particular case it's not a lot. But if you look at the solar down at the bottom over here on the left, it also shows that we're in float mode, which means the batteries are completely 100% the best they can get charged up, and that's why they're not doing much. And so that's why I'm saying, you know, you got to watch out how much solar you're buying, because if I'm already charged up by noon, then maybe I have too much solar for what I'm actually using. Now, that's just something to keep in mind, all right? So that's part of this whole thing of understanding your power usage. So hopefully you can understand I've shown you 2 things here. We use a lot of power, or we're not using any, and our solar panels are just sitting around twiddling their thumbs because they don't have to do anything. The batteries are already charged up by 10 o'clock in the morning, and so we're done, all right? So it really depends on how heavy that usage will be. So that's why usage is king. Batteries are the brain, but usage is the king that determines exactly how far you get to go before you have to do something. You know, either you're going to have solar, or you're going to have to hook up a generator or something, okay? Buy more batteries. Now, my next video, I'm actually going to go into batteries a little bit more. So one more video on this little series, just to kind of explain the batteries, how to make them, put them in series, parallel, and all that good old stuff as far as getting some usage out of your batteries and trying to figure out how many batteries you need. Anyway, a couple different examples. Maybe that will help you as far as figuring out your usage. Again, maybe I just create a lot more questions for you, but at least, you know, hopefully you're kind of starting to understand some of the stuff and some of the things that you actually have to look at. It's not that difficult. It's just a matter of figuring out all the things you have to do. And people always ask me, how do you figure this stuff out? Well, I'll tell you, I ask questions, all right? We build our own house. They said, how'd you figure out how to build your house? I asked questions, all right? So I'm here, ask questions of us. That's how you learn. And so hopefully this will give you some, idea what's going on, but it will spark some questions, and maybe we can have a little dialogue there, okay? Or get you in contact with some others that may help you out with that, or at least get you where you need to go. Okay. For now, this will be it, and so I'll just say that we'll see you down the road, and hopefully that'll be on our next video.